Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Final days on the campaign trail. This campaign season has been one for the record books in many different ways. As a political observer from a very young age, I feel comfortable describing this, as they say, one for the record books. On the fun side, there was Trump at the famed Al Smith dinner held annually and benefiting Catholic charities. In presidential years, it has become traditional for both major party candidates to participate. Harris, who appears to have no sense of humor, took a pass. This was also viewed in some circles as a slap in the face to Catholics. It was the first time since 1984 that the Democrat candidate for president did not participate. In contrast, Trump's writers had a field day and his delivery was spot on. Harris's answer to multiple questions that she was born in a middle-class family was DOA, dead on arrival with the electorate. In a desperate attempt to appeal to lower-income voters, she then claimed to have worked at a McDonald's while in a prestigious law school. McDonald's was unable to confirm that this was true. However, that would be an odd thing to do in law school. That is something that I have never really seen done. I mean, it's possible, but generally, law clerks have lots of lucrative opportunities to work as law clerks, help judges, do charity work. There's all sorts of things to do, generally not working at fast food restaurants. What her campaign did was to bungle into setting Trump up for a coup de grace, as he made a good-natured appearance as a worker at a McDonald's. Even some of the slopstream media had to admit that it was a hit. Harris seems committed to spouting the party line. When quizzed about whether Joe Biden is okay, she refused to admit that she is in the race solely because he is absolutely not okay. But then she could not explain why she was dropped into the race to replace him. Given the close numbers between the two major political parties, House and Senate races are important everywhere. Here in Texas, liberal millionaires have decided to try to get rid of conservative Senator Ted Cruz. They picked Colin Allred, currently a Congress member, to try for the upset. I believe this may go down in history as the most expensive U.S. Senate race. The TV ads run day and night for both candidates. Allred's biggest problem is that there are plenty of clips of him spouting off on his extreme liberal agenda. I call this the K. Harris problem. This is not 1924. A candidate cannot run around pretending to not say a bunch of stupid and anti-American things. The other problem is that there are an incredible number of TV ads attacking Cruz on abortion. The clear problem here is that abortion is now a state-by-state issue. If this is Allred's big weapon, then he needs to run against Texas Governor Abbott next time the seat is up for grabs. The election is just days away. There will be plenty to talk about after the votes are counted. U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan released a redacted version of the appendix to Special Counsel Jack Smith's election interference suit against former President Trump. This was tied to Smith's attempt to work around the Scottish presidential immunity ruling in this politically motivated case. The Trump camp fought the additional disclosure, arguing that the timing close to the election was election interference. Chutkan claimed that not releasing the documents in this highly charged and bogus case would be interference. I hope that the next Congress will investigate her actions with an eye towards impeachment. The batch of documents reportedly runs 1,900 pages. Anyone hoping to find some cool stuff will likely find all the juicy stuff was redacted. My take on this entire case is that an extraordinary waste of taxpayer money. Boeing and the union reach a tentative deal to end this big strike. This is a case where 33,000 union workers on strike are giving the Democrats a gimme, so things are delayed past the election. Boeing as a company is critical to America. It is the only American company making major airline jets. It is also involved in defense manufacturing. Due to what happens to be mismanagement over a long period of time, based on my opinion, the company has not been on top of safety, which always should be at the top of the priority list. The unions are getting a huge raise, just as we recently mentioned with the tentative dock workers strike settlement. However, just as that crew wanted to block automation, the Boeing union wants to restore some pension benefits that have been eliminated. Mortgage rates rise for the third straight week. In news that's unlikely to help the Biden-Harris administration, despite the reduction in the federal funds rate, highly publicized a couple of months ago now, the short-term reduction in mortgage rates has reversed. Due to low rates for a prolonged period of time, home buyers are still having sticker shock at current mortgage rates. The benchmark 30-year mortgage was about 6.5% now. This is still more than 1 percentage point lower compared to last year. So a little bit better, but maybe not enough to stimulate a lot of new home buyers. In the meantime, in many markets, the cost of housing itself has continued to increase. I heard a report that said housing costs have increased 10% in just the last year. Speaking of going hungry, another restaurant chain is taking a hit. The 24-hour breakfast chain Denny's will be closing 150 stores, which is about 10% of its locations. This is part of a nationwide pattern of restaurant chains giving up locations due to finances. It used to require all of the locations to be open 24 hours. Of course, it can be a little thin there late at night. So they're going to be looking at allowing different restaurants to be closed certain hours, again, to keep things on a better financial track. Paired with these moves, they will reduce the variety on their menu. I'm pretty sure this will mostly be breakfast in the future, not much else. Just a sign of tough times. The Federal Trade Commission just announced a new rule to protect consumers. This is called click to cancel rule. Sellers will need to make canceling their enrollment process at least as easy to use as the sign-up process. FTC Chair Lena M. Khan stated, nobody should be stuck paying for a service they no longer want. So the idea is that if the consumer signed up through an app, they can use a similar app to cancel. They do not have to go through a website or even mail something in to cancel. I know cases where consumers cancel credit cards just to shut off auto enrollment situations due to the difficulty of canceling a subscription. This cancellation rule should take effect in 6 months. The FTC also announced additional good news for consumers, a crackdown on fake reviews and testimonials. I do check things out online like restaurant and product reviews, so this is something I feel would be very helpful to consumers. FTC Chair Lena Khan stated, fake reviews not only waste people's time and money, but also pollute the marketplace and divert business away from honest competitors. By strengthening the FTC's toolkit to fight deceptive advertising, the final rule will protect Americans from getting cheated, put businesses that unlawfully game the system on notice, and promote markets that are fair, honest, and competitive. This rule should take effect in 60 days. The final rule prohibits totally fake reviews like using AI. but it also restricts user insider information to post reviews and other approaches that present reviews that are not really genuine. For insiders, the business would need to disclose their relationship to the business. I personally know of several cases where businesses would reward customers with free services or merchandise if they posted a positive review. It would seem that this rule is broad enough to prohibit that type of solicitation. A special interest to me is the prohibition of threats or of removing negative reviews. I had a surprise when several years ago I posted a restaurant review that I thought was anonymous, and it resulted in a personal attack from the restaurant manager. When I was attacked, despite providing honest feedback, I made sure personally that my friends knew which restaurant and what had happened. But it was still an ugly incident. And I'm still surprised the manager didn't call me up and say, hey, look, we're sorry you had a disappointing experience. We hope you'll come back. We're going to try and do better. This manager was all about, must have been your fault, not ours. Oh, well. The rule also restricts setting up fake social media accounts or using fake accounts to set up by others. Too soon to see if this will help consumers, but certainly I hope so. Millionaire Tim Walz claims mom would go hungry without her Social Security check. Based on reports, Walz has a net worth of $1 million. However, when asked about his 90-year-old mom, he said that unless his mom's Social Security check arrives on time, she will go hungry. Really, Tampon Timmy? So we have regressed into a communist state where the state has to do everything for you? Hey, you would not make sure your mom had food and shelter? Walz's pitch is that she should be depending on the state and, of course, like a good commie. U.S. forces shift strategy in matching up with China in the Pacific. As the son of a career member of the military, I'm so disappointed with our current military leadership. I see things going on and I wonder who is running the show. There's no room for woke in the military. There is no room for AWOL leaders and out-of-date plans and equipment. Every American who attended at least high school knows about Pearl Harbor. The American Navy, under the direction of then flawed President Franklin Roosevelt, parked its main Pacific Fleet assets in a harbor with a narrow opening. This is what made the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor so devastating in December of 1941. Given this extraordinary tragedy, I would think that any future military leadership would spread out key assets, especially with the very real threat from the whack job running China and the junior whack job running North Korea. Well, the Pentagon just announced that they figured this out and will diversify the location of assets to make it harder for China to hit a lot of assets at one time. Like I said, why would they have allowed assets to be consolidated up to now? How incompetent are they? The U.S. Air Force has called the shift in strategy Agile Combat Employment, or ACE, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal. They are looking at locating assets in more remote places. Of course, when assets are spread out, communication can be a little bit more of a challenge. Well, this is great. Of course, I have been advocating that we substantially invest in nuclear subs, since that is the ultimate diverse and hidden asset. Rising attacks on the U.S. power grid. Security for America increasingly is a concern. One area that is sometimes described as a soft target is the U.S. power grid. A recent BNN Bloomberg report cited an increased number of threats to the U.S. power grid. This would be a concern at any time. However, there is now growing concern that terrorists may target the power grid specifically to interfere with the presidential elections. A North American Electric Reliability Corporation report indicated that the power companies reported 185 physical attacks or threats on grid infrastructure in 2023. That was more than double the number from 2021. One senior U.S. official told the Canadian news outlet that threats against infrastructure such as the nation's power grid are becoming more acute. Christopher Goldsmith, founder of the nonprofit task force Butler Institute, told BNN Bloomberg that strategic blackouts could affect voting locations or impact the certification of elections. Something like a grid attack before, during, or after an election could So in an unbelievable amount of political chaos, according to Goldsmith. A May Bloomberg News poll found that half of swing state voters expect violence around the elections. Politico's news reported in April that rising incidents of domestic terrorism and a surge in state-sponsored cyber attacks on critical infrastructure are posing a heightened risk to the U.S. power system and the elections. The current geopolitical situation has significant ramifications for the North American grid, again, according to NERC. Police have charged suspects in connection with plots to attack energy facilities in Idaho, Maryland, and Ohio since 2022. Folks, this is a real risk. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. And when you hear this guest's background and opinions, I know you're going to agree with me that Saving America has got a great guest in Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi. He holds an LLB from the University of Tokyo and a doctorate in national security from Takukushu University. He has had a long media history with Nikkei Business Management magazine. During that time, he also was a Fulbright visiting fellow at Princeton University. Among other impressive credentials, he was president of the Foreign Press Association in London from 1999 to 2000. He is also a multi-published author, too long a list for us to go through. Dr. Taniguchi is perhaps best known for his work with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as his cabinet special advisor and the Prime Minister's primary foreign policy speechwriter from January 2013 until September 2020, when the late Mr. Abe stepped down as Prime Minister. He now serves as specially appointed professor at the University of Tsukuba and senior fellow GRIPS Alliance, National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. He teaches international political economy, Japan's strategic diplomacy, and Japan's post-war political economic development. And he teaches in English as well as in Japanese. I'm just happy to get through it in English, folks. I had the great pleasure of meeting him in person during my one visit to Japan about 6 years ago. We welcome Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, Dave. I'm very much pleased to be with you for this Saving America program.
And it is so good to see you after our last all too brief visit. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. In a recent article, you explained that the election of Shigeru Ishiba as the new president of Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, will make Ishiba Japan's next prime minister. Can you explain how that electoral process works in Japan? Because it's quite different than here in the United States.
It is indeed very much different from what you have in the United States. Because Japan does not have any presidential system. It is a parliamentary democracy akin to what you see in the United Kingdom. If you get a majority in the lower house, then the head of the major majority party almost automatically gets elected by the parliamentarians as the nation's prime minister. Theoretically, it's not the end of the story because the appointed prime minister designate is still a designate, because the final endorsement should come from His Majesty, the Emperor, because Japan is running a monarchical, constitutional monarchical system. So that's the process. The election took place on the 27th of September. It was not, by definition, an election of some kind of nationwide election. It's, may I say, a party affair or family affair, if you like, that took place only within and among parliamentarians and grassroots members of the party, Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. And someone called Shigeru Ishiba was elected finally by the 2-phased votes. And the president of the party now is prime minister because the whole process has just finished, and he has put together already his cabinet of ministers of line government ministries. So that's the process. What's interesting is he, after get elected as prime minister, has chosen to dissolve Japanese lower house parliament, despite the fact that he has done very, very little since taking office. He says that by calling general elections and winning endorsements from the general voters, public, then he can pursue his set of policy agendas with trust he will earn from the Japanese voters. So that's what's going on and what will likely happen. And the next day for you to watch is 29th of October, this month,
Very good.
actually.
Very good. Well, we will certainly watch for that. So, your second question is, in your article, you comment on Ishiba's rise to power. You note that he was the leading rival of the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and that its political star will likely soon fall. Would you please comment on this and how this could impact Southeast Asia?
Yes, Shinzo Abe, the late Japanese Prime Minister, whom I worked very closely with, uh, his term, his term was one of the actually longest. It lasted more than 7 years, and 7 years and 8 months. And he had a previous term in office, which lasted for 1 year. So a total of 8 years and 8 months. Believe me, this is actually the longest record ever recorded by any Japanese prime minister since Japan adopted the system of modern politics back in the late 19th century. 19th century. So during that time, Mr. Ishiba, the new prime minister, was very much in the backbench, on the backbench, and he oftentimes criticized from Abe's back. And I witnessed those what Ishiba did against towards Abe many times. As the saying goes, in the parliamentary system, your political opponent may be in front of you across the aisle, but your real enemies are on your back. And that's what's happened since Shinzo Abe took office. And Shigeru Ishiba always criticized all kinds of policies that Shinzo Abe was after. So I detected a sense of grudge developed by Ishiba and between these two individuals. Now, he has tried to win the race to become the president first of the party, and then get elected by the parliament as prime minister as many as 5 times. So he made a pronouncement before running that this election was going to be the last one in his political career. And then you could say for the last attempt, he succeeded. Now, he has said a number of sloppy things. By sloppy, what does it mean? I'm going to tell you what. He has proposed, number one, tax hike. I was very much surprised by his policy agendas, especially because he says that he's going to call general elections earlier than many thought. Is it true that Shigeru Ishiba, the new prime minister, is going to push this policy hike agendas, and then he's thinking that he could win the vote. Very few, if any, prime ministers or very few leaders of the political party have won by proposing raising taxes, plural, not singular, because he has proposed that he is going to raise personal, individual income tax, and then he is going to raise corporate tax. In addition, he said he would be interested in raising tax for capital gains. That's devastating. Reflecting that, the first trading day of this week, Monday, the stock index nosedived, fearful of Shigeru Ishiba's policy agendas. So that was point number one. And point number two is about national security or Japanese diplomacy. He has proposed establishing Asian version of NATO. What would you say to this proposal? Are the Japanese interested in bringing America further into the security situations in the Indo-Pacific, just as the United States has played the most significant role transatlantic? So without consulting very much heavily with the US counterpart, you could not possibly propose anything like this, because after all, the United States is the most important, is the most powerful, is the most battle ready, if you like, provider of force, both to the Atlantic region and to the Indo-Pacific region. Wait a second. That has been in place for many, many decades. Indeed, the United States led the coalition and won the war in Korean Peninsula and got engaged in terrible battle and bloody warfare in the Indochina to primarily safeguard the rules-based international order that in turn benefited Japan first and foremost. Why? Because in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, this country, Japan, was the only industrialized democracy where when all others, including South Korea, were extremely poor and under dictatorship. So what's going to change even with this new arrangement of Asia's version of NATO? I don't think very little will change. The current situation for your viewers is that Japan has been hosting the biggest number of U.S. military personnel and the most substantial military assets, naval and Air Force and Marines on the soil of Japan. By so doing, the United States is able to keep its forward deployed forces in this troubled region, neighborhood of the Indo-Pacific. And the Japanese taxpayers have been very much willing to support and cover the cost of the deployment. And indeed, it's much less expensive, if you like, to put U.S. military assets and personnel in Japan rather than putting them on the soil of the state of California, if you like, in the United States. So that's the arrangement that's been tested by history, and that's been in place for decades. So what more net benefit, net gain the United States could expect from building this Asia's version of NATO? is extremely doubtful, is an open-ended question. So that was the second question that came to my mind. Thirdly, he has not earned reputation, if I may say frankly, as a leader that could lead complex organizations. Some say he is very much slow in making decisions. He dodges difficult questions, and he dodges ultimate responsibility that otherwise should have been taken by the leader, i.e., Mr. Ishiba. And so he is not the sort of leader that's shown its leadership timber, if you like. All that being said, one should and could hope that he is a quick learner and he knows what to be done, what not to be done, especially when faced with imminent challenge of general elections. He has to be more balanced, and he has to strike a very good balance when presenting his policy agendas. But so far, those 3 points, three factors that I mentioned, have worried me very much. Once again, whether he is a quick learner or not is something that I would very much like to pay attention to.
Well, that sounds like some very valuable information for those of us who do observe world politics very closely. And we have a little bit of time left. We did want to get to our third question. With your international experience combined with your domestic experiences, how does Japan view the United States these days? Does it vary with who is president, or is there a longer term view?
Let me tell you how my previous boss, the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, viewed the United States. His was an interesting experience. He first dealt with Barack Obama, and then he dealt with Donald Trump, polar opposite. And may I say, he succeeded in building very good rapport with either of these two presidents. Why? Because number one, he paid very much substantial respect to the U.S. democratic process. Either of these two presidents was who the American voters actually chose. There of course does exist a huge divide between the two parties, but the net result is you choose your president, and from outside, as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe paid respect to the decision ultimately reached by the voting process, democratically run voting process of the United States. Never, never underestimate the resilience, robustness of the oldest democratic system that humans have, and that's about the United States. So that's how Shinzo Abe viewed. Next, given the fact that the United States, the ultimate provider of security, not only to Japan, but also to the entire Indo-Pacific region, as head of the country that hosts the huge amount of U.S. forward deployed forces, it is incumbent always upon the Japanese Prime Minister to build as good rapport as possible with the U.S. President. So that was the second motivation. Certainly, there are growing concerns, like everyone else in Japan, about, may I say, the volatility of the U.S. political process, the deepened division between the two ends of the political spectrum, and uh, the fact that the next, if elected, Donald Trump can stay in office only for 4 years, not 8 years, for years. So there is a likelihood, if I may say, that Mr. Trump is going to be shorter sighted, if you like, than before. So those are some of the concerns. And if you look at the political discourse found in Japan, you can see similar voices um, uh, uh, expressed by the Japanese pundits and policy opinion formers, just as you can see similar debates and discussions in any countries, in any other country like the United Kingdom, France, or Germany. But let me put just one thing. Very few people in Japan say sort of derogatory, nasty things about either one of those candidates, especially about Donald Trump. Well, it's become sort of national pastime for some countries in Europe to say very much nasty, derogatory things about Donald Trump, but you wouldn't hear much about much of those uh, dirty words spoken by the Japanese politicians or opinion formers when it comes to Donald J. Trump.
Fascinating situation. Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi, how can our audience get more information about you and your many writings?
Right, just Google my complex name, Tomohiko Taniguchi, and you can find a lot of live interviews that I gave to international broadcast networks such as CNN, BBC, and so on and so forth. And if you cross check my full name and Foreign Affairs, one of the prominent magazines in the United States, you can see what I wrote recently about China and Sino-Japanese relationship. And also, if you cross-check my full name and The Economist, British news magazine, then you can find what I wrote as a sort of obituary for the late Prime Minister.
Which I read also. Yes, a very fine piece and a very nice salute to a very positive world leader. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. The U.S. Supreme Court denies RFK Jr.'s request for a spot on the New York presidential ballot. This is a truly odd situation since RFK Jr. recently suspended his campaign and has thrown his support behind former President Trump. As part of that effort, he has been involved in litigation to remove his name from numerous state ballots. The current concern is that if he is listed separately, voters unhappy with both major political party candidates will vote directly for him. The theory being that this will divert votes away from Trump. However, in New York, he has taken a different approach. His supporters have filed petitions in New York for him to be a presidential candidate, initially as a Democrat, but later after internal issues between him and the party as an independent. However, some voters, with the assistance of Clear Choice Action, a group supporting the Democratic Party, went to state court to challenge Kennedy's placement on the ballot. The argument was that RFK Jr. was using an address of a rented room of a friend in New York. However, he really lived with his wife, actress Cheryl Hines, in California. This resulted in a New York court order that removed him from the New York presidential ballot on the basis that the address used for him was not legitimate in his paperwork. Kennedy then argued that his address was a mere technical requirement and that barring him from the ballot would deny his supporters a chance to vote for him. After washing out of the New York courts, Kennedy went to the federal courts, where he was equally unsuccessful. His side raised a 1983 ruling of SCOTUS in a ballot case involving former presidential candidate John Anderson. That's right, folks, 40 years ago. In that case, Anderson argued that a March deadline to appear on the ballot was an unfair burden. At that time, the High Court agreed that this was a mere technical issue that could be overcome. However, in the current case, New York argued that ballots were already being printed without his name. Further, that there was no harm since Kennedy had already withdrawn from the race. This appeared to be the compelling arguments before the High Court. This is from an article in the American Thinker. Pennsylvania may be the most crucial of the 6 or 7 states described as swing states. In one way, the Dems shot themselves in the foot not selecting moderate Democrat Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor, as Harris's VP select. How ballots are handled in Pennsylvania is critically important. The state does not require ID when voting by mail. Worse, Pennsylvania Supreme Court has eliminated signature match. They have no idea who is voting these mail ballots. The latest offense by its Supreme Court is that the ballots do not even have to be dated. You know, the Dems are crooked since they will not endorse policies on ballot security and citizenship verification. I hope we can get a red sweep this election season, and maybe we can get a nonpartisan election reform movement going. Saving America welcomes FM Red O'Loughlin III. He is a researcher, author, public speaker, independent publisher, and broadcast host himself. He speaks on health and wellness, aging, personal growth, and motivation. Red retired as a naval captain with 31 years in the Navy Reserves. He was a naval flight officer and flew nearly 1,000 missions in P-3 anti-submarine aircraft. He served in Vietnam and retired as the Deputy Director of Reserve Affairs in Stuttgart, Germany. Red has traveled to 60 countries during his military career. Captain O'Loughlin has been awarded numerous military honors due to his long and distinguished career. Red's professional civilian specialties are quality assurance, reliability engineering, and logistics. He has worked in senior management positions at National Semiconductor, Memorex, Dresser Industries, NL Industries, Boeing, and Halliburton. I had to stop the bio there since otherwise there'd be no time for the interview. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. We welcome Red O'Loughlin for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, Dave. I am really honored to be on your show. I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
And in turn, I think, you know, I am what they call a Navy brat. My dad did 28 and a half years in the Navy, so very respectful of the military, and certainly your commitment to the military is much appreciated. With your long military career, what do you think of the current focus of the U.S. military in its difficulty recruiting new enlistees? Do you have some suggestions?
Well, I went in during Vietnam, and so that's a totally different mindset, because back then I expected, having a degree in chemistry, that I was going to be excluded from the national defense exemption at that time. And then the president decided, no, they want the best and the brightest. Everybody comes in. And so unless you had a family already or you went to Canada, you were part of that crowd that got there. And so there was very little opportunity for you not to go in. Now, we had the Vietnam War going on, not very popular. You turn that around to look at 9/11, and then everybody's going in. So it's a perspective of what's going on in the world at the time. You have people who says, well, I can go in the military to avoid going to jail. I can go in the military to learn a new trade. I can go in the military to do whatever. So you have people coming in, they want to be pilots. They want to be whatever their passion is. They may not even know what it is. Maybe they just need the stability of the military. So from a perspective, I think that there's a couple drivers. And right now we're in that cycle where you have the wokeness and the DEI and other social engineering things. And I don't think the military ought to be a social engineering organization. You want a tip of a spear that will go in and take care of whatever's there, but you also need the logistical support. You need a lot of other things to make those things happen. So from a perspective of, if 10 years ago, my perspective was different than today, but let's say that you had a son coming out of high school and you asked me as a military, would you talk to him? I would say, Dave, I'd be more than happy to. And so I go talk to, let's say his name is John. And John, you're getting ready to graduate. What, you have any career? No, they don't know what they want to do. Well, I would recommend they go in the Coast Guard initially for 2 to 4 years. Why? Because in the Coast Guard, it's a much smaller service and you give a lot more responsibility at the lower levels. You take a level such as a enlisted level 4, second class petty officer. And the responsibility isn't the same. In the Coast Guard, you have tons of responsibility at that level. But in the Navy, Army, and Air Force, they're not allowed that level of responsibility because that's usually reserved 2 or 3 levels up. And so you end up with a situation where you have the military discipline, you have the stability, you have a lot of things there. So now they put 3 or 4 years in, they have some kind of educational program. They get out, they can go to college because now it's going to be paid for. Now, if they want to go in, depending on what their skill sets and what their goals are, they want to go in the Air Force, the Marine Corps, whatever. They have that option. They can go in the reserves. So there's a lot of things there. But I think that the Coast Guard, and I've worked with them a lot over the years, and that's what's changed my perspective. But I think that would be a perfect place for a young person to go because you're going to get that responsibility, the discipline immediately, and then you can make a better decision when you're 20, 21, 22.
Well, switching gears a little bit, Red, I know that your passion is health and wellness. And what of your books might people want to read, and how would that help them? Where can they find those books that you've written?
Okay, all of my books are available on my website or on the Amazon. So I just usually send people to Amazon. It's a lot easier. Just put in Red O'Laughlin and my books pop up. My website is redolaughlin.com. But I'm a researcher. I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat symptoms, and you'll always be treating symptoms. And so we have a problem as you're treating symptoms, but the cause keeps getting worse over time, and you see no progress, whatever. So I'm looking for things. In other words, if I were to say, let's get calcium into your bones. Well, you need to take something that's calcium, and most people take calcium carbonate. It's a pill. It's worthless because it takes so much to get a little bit into the body. But let's say you're eating the right combination of fruits and vegetables and you're getting your calcium, but you have to have magnesium in your body in order for that to get processed. It's not bioavailable. So now you get the calcium in the stomach, it's being absorbed, it's leaving the duodenum, and if you have enough vitamin D3, the calcium is going to be pulled into the bloodstream. Okay, now you get in the bloodstream, that's where you want it, but you want it in the bones. However, if you don't have enough vitamin K2, that calcium is going to go to your heart valves and arteries as plaque. So now you have to have vitamin K2, vitamin D3, magnesium, and calcium. So that's kind of, there's other things in there, but that's the short one. Now you get it into the bones, it's much more difficult to keep it in the bones than it is to get it there. Because what happens is your body has what's called a pH. It's a balance between being acidic and alkaline. And the body's blood system needs a pH of about 7.4, plus or minus a little. And so if you're in 7.4, hey, everything's fine. Calcium stays in the bones. Everybody's a happy camper. But anytime you eat protein, fat, carbohydrates, you exercise, you breathe, you think, your body becomes more acidic, less than 7.4. What happens then? The bloodstream reaches into the bones, grabs calcium molecules, and stabilizes the pH of the bloodstream. Now, I've been a runner for decades, weightlifter. I've been all sorts of stuff. The very first time I ever had a bone density test, I was osteopenic, and it just drove me crazy. I couldn't figure out why. Well, I looked at all the things I was doing when I started doing some research, and I was keeping my body severely in that acidic range. So my body was constantly leaching my bones of calcium in order to maintain a blood pH for health. So what happens when you get old? Well, brittle bone, other things, and those things are issues that become a problem. And so you have to take primarily fruits and vegetables in a higher level of dose in order to offset all those other foods you eat and all the other activities you have, just the metabolic processes. So what I do is that's what I look at. Now, I have 2 books out there. The Joy of Ageless Health covers 7 different things: stress, toxins, radiation, infection, inflammation, diet, even expectations. These are things that operate at the cellular level in the body and do that inflammation, chronic low level. You're starting to get some level of mutation at the DNA level. So if that's the case, what can you do about it? Well, with stress, there's certain things, with toxins, there's certain things. And I go into detail on the Joy of Ageless Health as to what can you do to prevent disease from even taking part in the body. So if we follow that other exercise and say, if I'm getting a lot of fruits and vegetables, I'm probably keeping my body alkaline, which just really pushes off a lot of diseases, but also makes us a lot more healthier down the road. The other one that I would talk about today real quickly is the longevity secrets for healthy aging. And that particular one talks about the two primary causes of aging: the telomere length at the end of your DNA, where the DNA is kind of wrapped around each other. It's, if you look at your shoelace, you have a caplet at the end, a little plastic thing that keeps all the fibers together. Well, every time the cell replicates, you lose a little bit of the end of that telomere. And over time, the cell replicates enough, boom, there's not enough there, the cell dies, normal death, planned. That's the way everything works. However, if you're overweight, you're a smoker, you have diabetes, instead of having just a little bit of that telomere cut off, you have a lot of that telomere cut off. And so you kind of reduce the age of that cell. The other one is a thing called human growth hormone. You know, when we're little kids, we got tons of that stuff. However, as you get older, you're making less and less. And there's a lot of things with age that you make less and less. Well, something as simple as a fast will cause that human growth hormone to increase significantly. And so those are things that I talk about in there. What causes you to age? What can you do to accelerate your aging? What can you do to decelerate your aging? So those are two books that I would recommend: The Longevity Secrets of Healthy Aging and The Joy of Ageless Health. So those are two that I would strongly recommend to somebody who has a real interest in keeping their health.
Sounds good to me, Brad. Our third question today is we're going to switch gears a little bit. As you know, we met for lunch recently, and you shared with me your new book, Heaven, the Final Destination. Please tell our audience a little bit about that book and how it might help them.
Okay, I'm a Catholic. I have been all my life. I consider myself devout. I go every Sundays. I go to confession. I keep up with that stuff. I was at church yesterday for a couple hours, adoration, etc. Anyway, I'm getting older. I would love to go to heaven. I think that's our general destination for most of us. That's our desire. Now, Catholics believe in purgatory, which other religions don't necessarily consider. But I want to know, how can I get to heaven, David? Straight there, bypass purgatory. That was my desire. So when I started researching, I found it's the same thing that I do. If I say, okay, tell me about what causes cancer? You know, what causes Alzheimer's? You can't ask that question. You have to ask it in a roundabout way. Well, the same thing in the Catholic faith. You know, I go to the magisterium, tradition, history, scripture, Bible, and then you have to almost go into some specifics. You know, what did God promise? What did Jesus promise? What did Mary promise? And when I start looking at those things, I can find promises in there. You do this, you get this reward. Okay, well, why isn't the church teaching me more about that? Because that's my long-term destination. I want to know. Well, my perspective is things have changed over time, where they used to talk about heaven and hell and long sermons. Now it's a homily, and it's more or less focused on something that the bishop in the diocese wants to talk about, or something dealing with the gospels and readings of the day. But if we look at sin, and you know, you have the sin, and traditional way that it was explained to us as little kids, you break a window and you go next door and you ask for, you know, mercy, you ask for, you know, forgiveness, and the guy says, no problem at all, you're forgiven, I understand, you're kids. Well, when I go to confession, that external punishment due to that sin is forgiven, but there's a temporal permanent punishment, not from God's perspective, but from the sin itself. Now, that is the sin that I have to make up for. That temporal punishment, according to the Catholic faith, is something that has to be taken care of in purgatory in order to enter heaven purified. And so I look at those things that, well, how do I get there? Well, baptism, you know, sacrament wipes all that out. So if I wait till I'm 78 years of age, I get baptized and I die at 78 and a half, you know, I'm pretty good shape. But if I get last rites at 78 years of age, that's a free ticket straight into heaven, because it removes all that temporal punishment. But there's a lot of other things. You know, if we just look at a simple thing, David, if you don't ask, you're not going to receive. So ask and receive, expect. But the other things in the sacraments, there's a brown scapular. I wear this thing. There's certain promises that with that scapular, you have plenary indulgences. There's certain requirements for that take away the temporal punishment. There are First Fridays, First Saturdays. There's a lot, Seven Sorrows of Mary. There's a lot of things, but I think probably one of the biggest ones is the St. Bridget prayers. There's a 15 prayer combination for a year and a 7 prayer combination for 12 years. And the 7-year compilation is one that specifically God says, you do this for 12 years. And the first thing on the line, it says, no purgatory. Well, I'm at 78 years of age. Well, that's 90. Well, I might as well say it the rest of my life because I'm, at some point in time. Now, let's say that I'm saying it and I've only said it for 5 years. Well, they have a caveat in there that says your intention was you're doing it. Okay, you earned it. So anyway, that's what I talk about in my book. And that if you're a devout Catholic and you want to really know a little bit more about how you get your soul into heaven, I would strongly suggest you look at that one.
Sounds fascinating. I think most of us do want to go to heaven for sure. And Red, you mentioned it a minute ago, but how can our audience get more information about you and your books?
RedO'Laughlin.com. That's RedOlaughlin. RedOlaughlin.com. It's probably the easiest place to get information about me. I'm available pretty, you give me a call on the phone, I'll talk to you. That's usually the best way to reach me. But I have email sites. I check some of them. I got 3 different ones. I check, one constantly 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. I check the other ones usually once or twice a day. But yeah, send me an email, give me a phone call, take a look at my stuff on my website. More than happy to have a conversation with you.
Sounds like a winner. Thank you very much, Red O'Laughlin, for joining us on Saving America. All of the slopstream media seems to want to talk about regarding J.D. Vance is to repeat his recent comment about women who do not want to have children. I do not share his opinion on that, but there's a lot more to this candidate. Vance served in the Marine Corps from 2003 to 2007. He was deployed to Iraq for 6 months during that period. After graduating from Ohio State University in 2009 and Yale Law School in 2013, he worked at a venture capital firm briefly. He then started his own venture capital firm. This is a bright, ambitious person. He became somewhat famous when his book, Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of family and culture in crisis, was published in 2016. It was later made into a movie. I have not read the book. I've not seen the movie, but I understand it details the struggles he faced growing up with poverty, an addicted mother. His grandmother, who was deeply religious, raised him and imbued him with certain key principles. He became a senator in Ohio by defeating an incumbent Democrat in 2022. I would say his opinions are conservative, moderate. This is not your run-of-the-mill, all right side politics are right. Like me, he emphasizes that America needs to focus on the threat from communist China and North Korea. He is a man of strong faith. He has just turned 40, so a young candidate these days, and he and his wife have 3 young children. But he expresses his religious beliefs openly, and I believe that's a positive in a world that needs to have some ethical guidance. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.